let's start with the Borealis. I think the big news is we'll be celebrating our second anniversary of the service in 2 weeks on May 21st, which is great. So the states and Amtrak are working on news release. I know All Aboard Minnesota is planning to be at stations in Minnesota talking to passengers. I think they're also going to have a little bit more of an event at St. Paul Union Depot. WizArt's also planning, I think, a news release and a social media campaign. So I'll look for some materials coming out here around the 21st. I also want to let everybody know that on April 20th that we implemented an interim schedule for the Borealis. That's going to go through June 21st. It adds 15 minutes to the schedule, and this is similar to what we did last summer. And it's to account for some planned track maintenance. Last summer it was on the river sub in Minnesota. This year it's going to be on the Watertown sub in Wisconsin. So for 1333, which is the west or northbound train, it basically adds 15 minutes of recovery time getting into St. Paul. Starts out of Chicago at its normal schedule, and then we add 15 minutes at the end. 1340, which is the eastbound or southbound train, depending on your perspective, is going to depart St. Paul 15 minutes earlier than our normal schedule. So we're going to leave at 11:36 a.m. And then we're going to have some schedule adjustments working south with earlier departures to account for that track work in Wisconsin. So I think one request from Kevin and the commission during last meeting was that we give an update on the construction project. We haven't really talked about that for a while. So what it entails, I think we have a few new folks, so we'll just kind of go through what some of those planned capital improvements are for the project. And just as a reminder, I often get questions, why are we doing construction if the train's already in service? And so just as a reminder, back around 2023, Canadian Pacific Railway, which we operate on north of Chicago up to the Twin Cities, is the host railroad. They were looking at merging with Kansas City Southern, and so they worked out between Amtrak and Canadian Pacific. They worked out an agreement to allow service to start before we complete construction. So it's pretty unusual that this would happen. So they did that, and that was a condition, I think, of Amtrak. We weren't part of the negotiations, but I believe that was agreement to allow the service to start to get Amtrak support for that merger. So that's how we got to starting service before construction. Kind of looking at construction itself, we have construction in 3 locations. First is La Crosse, Wisconsin. In La Crosse, we're going to be adding a second main through town there. That's going to allow trains to pass. And really, this is all about addressing bottlenecks and opening up some capacity for better on-time performance and reliability of the passenger services. So we'll add that second main. That's also going to allow the passenger trains to, if you're familiar with La Crosse, you have the station, there's the historic kind of covered platform, and then there's gravel where tracks used to be, and then there's another platform further out that's not covered, and that's on the main line where the trains currently stop. So what we're going to do, we're going to add that second main that's going to go back into the space adjacent to the historic covered platform, so we can serve that platform. It'll be covered when it's raining or in the winter, so it just has more protection, which will be a good thing. And I know we also often get questions about why are we doing this, because there's two tracks there. And what most people don't realize is there's one main line, and then the other track that's actually in place is actually the yard lead for doing all the switching movements in and out of the yard. So this right now kind of sometimes acts as a main line, which creates a bottleneck for switching as well as all the freight and passenger rail movements through there. So this will allow the actual through trains to avoid impeding yard movements. We're also going to improve the 2 grade crossings to the east of the depot. those both go through intersections. And so I know it's a kind of a complicated project, and WisDOT's working on that. And it's currently with the OCR in Wisconsin, which has to make decisions on grade crossing improvements. Moving on to the river in the Crescent. So the first thing is at the Mississippi River Bridge, we're going to upgrade that bridge. And what's happening there is we're making some improvements to it to allow freight train speeds to increase across that bridge. Currently, they're restricted to 5 miles an hour, which is pretty slow. And if you have a mile or two long train, that takes a lot of time to go across the bridge. So we're going to make some upgrades that are going to allow freight trains to increase their speed from 5 to 10 miles an hour, which may not sound like much, but that's really doubling the speed. So when you think of it from that perspective, that gets those trains across a lot quicker and opens up a lot more space for other trains to get through, including passenger trains, and helps improve that reliability. Coming off the bridge on the Minnesota side, we're also going to, the tracks kind of curve up to the northwest. And then there's also a switch right there that heads on the track that goes directly into La Crescent. So we're going to modify all that as well to allow those trains to increase that speed from 5 to 10 through that curve and across the bridge. And so we have to shift the alignment of that curve a little bit to flatten it out so the trains can go faster through it. So that's all the Mississippi River Bridge work. And then at River Junction, which is actually in La Crescent there, we're going to upgrade an existing siding through town to a main line. And so basically what that's going to do is create a big kind of triangle, I'm going to say, kind of like this. So passengers will have basically two main lines. So one can go through town and then head up to the Mississippi River Bridge, and the other can head up the river sub. So basically that works as like almost a double track right through that area, which is great. So we can have passenger trains on the river sub, and the freight trains can go through town and get out the passenger trains ways. That also means we need to upgrade or add some sidings in that yard there in La Crescent to replace that existing one. And we need to modify some switches and move some around because we're adding tracks and shifting tracks to make all that work. Moving on to Winona, there's kind of two work areas. The main one is Winona siding, which runs through most of town. As most of you have probably seen, there's one main line and one siding that goes through town. The siding, we'll say, is kind of on the northeast side, and the main line is on we'll say, the southwest side. And so if you've ever ridden through on the train in Winona, you'll notice we stop on the main line and there's little pads on that siding, and you basically have to stand on those to board the train, which is not a great situation. A little unsafe. We never like to have people standing on a live siding. So what we're going to do is we're going to upgrade that siding to mainline speed through town, and then we're going to add power switches at each end. So those right now they're manual switches. So if you want to use that siding, train has to stop, conductor has to throw the switch, train goes into the siding, conductor throws the switch back to the main line, and then has to walk back up to the train so they can proceed again. At the other end, you need to do the same thing. So if we were doing it with a passenger train or a freight train, you can just imagine how much time that takes. So we're going to power those up. That will allow the dispatcher to do that remotely. And so the train can kind of use that siding seamlessly. So that does two things. That allows us to get the passenger trains onto that siding, use it, and by upgrading it to the main line speed through town, we're not taking a delay from having to travel like 10 miles an hour on that track. We can go mainline speed. That also allows us to get back over to where that historic platform is. As a separate project, Amtrak is going to be replacing that existing kind of old, historic platform with an ADA compliant new platform. That's a separate project, but it is being coordinated with this project. And so, the other benefit of all this siding work here is that, while we're in the siding, if you're going southbound, a freight train can be on the main line and pass northbound. So it just opens up and reduces the bottleneck there. And then similarly, having those two trains be able to pass each other At the same time, there that should reduce the overall crossing gate downtime. You aren't waiting for, you get two trains across at once versus, one at a time. So that'll be an improvement there. And we also need to, because we're upgrading that siding, we do need to upgrade a bunch of those crossings through town to address the humps, because we're going to be lifting up that siding. And then there'll be some signal improvements at a number of crossings as well. And then we're also going to be closing one pedestrian crossing there just to increase some of the safety. And then at the north end of town at Tower CK, for those of you familiar with Winona, it'd be basically Beer Street. UP has a line that comes in. There's a junction with Canadian Pacific, Kansas City right there. So we're going to add another track, I will say, on the west or southwest side of the existing main line. And that's going to allow through freight and passenger trains to get through there a little bit faster and easier, and not have to worry about trains that are connecting with that UP line. So it basically eliminates or helps address a bottleneck right there. And then related to that, then we're also going to make a lot of upgrades and redo the siding at Beer Street. Right now there's the CPKC main line, and then a little bit further east there's the UP crossing. It's all kind of in one big crossing. There's kind of flashing lights at each end. So we need to move, reprofile that road to accommodate the second track in there for the CPKC, and then do the signal work. So that's a kind of a summary of all the work that's going to be done. And then in terms of timing, just want to give you kind of an update where we are with the project. We just got our environmental signed off by FRA here a few weeks ago in April. Great thing to hear. It took a little bit longer than we thought for a number of reasons. I think a big holdup was we're waiting on some endangered species mapping issues with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, since that kind of held up our timeline for several months while they got their maps updated. So once they did, then we got this quickly wrapped up within probably a week or two. So that was great to see. So now that environmental review is done, or the categorical exclusion for the project is what it's technically called, we are proceeding with permitting, and that will continue through the summer. In terms of final design, we're also underway. I think I previously mentioned that we've wrapped up 90% design last year, and since that time we've really been working with CPKC to respond and address their comments on those plans. And so that's you may ask why it takes long, but they kind of need to review each piece, and a lot of times that goes to multiple different parts of the railroad, not just like one part, and they all need to collaborate, make sure, from an operational perspective, from a track perspective, from a signal perspective, that everything kind of aligns up. So sometimes it takes them a while to respond, and then we have weekly working sessions with them to work through different details. And so then sometimes they need to go back and make sure everything works for them, and then the states need to do the same thing. So it's a lengthy process, but we're getting pretty close to wrapping that up. We're also, where we have gotten everything wrapped up for different pieces of the project, CPKC is now working on cost estimates and getting those to us, and the states are reviewing, and we're working through those with the railroad. Those estimates from the railroad will continue to come in here probably over the next month or two. So, we're still targeting to try and get those wrapped up here this summer. And then concurrently, we're working on drafting all the different construction agreements so we can get those turned around and signed once we finalize the design and cost estimate. So we can get a lot of that framed in now. So that's what we're working on. Concurrently, we're also working on right-of-way acquisition. I think I mentioned this before. That's typically about a 2-year process, and that's part of why our construction did shift back a little bit because there were just a lot more parcels than were originally anticipated. As design advanced, we worked through the details. We realized we need to get a lot more temporary easements than originally thought, largely for grade crossings, for access to rebuild sidewalks, simple things like that. That just takes a long time. So now the environmental review is done. That was kind of the last piece that was needed to be completed so that we could kind of the box check to start making offers to property owners. So we've had those initial communications, but we couldn't make the offers until that environmental review is done. So now that that's done, those offers are underway. And so those will continue here, being made here over the next month or two. Looking ahead to construction, again, since we're still trying to finalize designing, of course, construction hasn't started. It's currently planned for 27 and 28. Chance we might get some stuff done over the winter, but largely it'll be the 27, 28 construction seasons. And then again, we need to get the design and all of the costs finalized and those construction agreements done before we can start that work. So we can continue to give you some updates on that as we get further into 2026 and into early 2027. So that's what I have for the construction piece.
Walter Meyer, Winona Planning Commission. So, Greg, do you know, or are you familiar with PennDOT's reconstruction of Main Street in Winona for 2028? I believe that's the year that's scheduled. And will this, how will this tie in with proposed work at the platform, since Main Street is right next to the depot?
Sure. So we have been coordinating with the district on that. We have some district staff that are also working on this project, so we are coordinating. So this project will just include the siding upgrade, and at Main Street it will include the crossing work there. That station platform, that will be done by Amtrak as part of a separate project, and so we'll be coordinating with them. I think that's currently tentatively scheduled for 2028. I can always follow up on that with Amtrak and confirm that. So there will be a lot of activity going through that. I haven't seen the final details because that's being led by Amtrak. I haven't seen their final design on this, but if you want to have a meeting or talk further, please reach out to me. We can have that conversation.
Okay, thank you so much, Greg.
All right, thank you.
So the next presentation is from Rich Kedzior, who I think I saw on Zoom. And he's going to share information with us about the Wisconsin Corridor ID projects.
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I just have a very, very brief presentation, just a couple of slides. This is the quickly Empire Builder ridership. This is what it's been for the past few months. We don't have any data for April yet. And this is for the whole route. This is not just Wisconsin or Minnesota. Moving on to Borealis performance, which I'm sure this is, lots of folks are interested in this. Our January, February, and March, the ridership for those 3 months is down compared to 2025. April is the first month, April 2026 is the first month where year over year it's not affected by the Horizon embargo. Of course, ridership is down because of the Horizon embargo, but March 2025 was the first month we saw the ridership decline. And so April 2025 was the first month where first full month we only had 3 coaches. So what's remarkable about April 2026 is ridership is up 10.8% year over year versus April 2025. So we're pretty pleased by that. We're not exactly sure why that occurred, but we are happy with it, and we hope that trend continues for the rest of the year. Overall, for those 4 months, January to April, ridership is down 3.2%. Compared to 2025, but we believe that's entirely due to reduced seating capacity. We do, and like I said, like we noted, ridership is up 10.8% year over year. We see no reason why that trend won't continue. We don't know exactly everything that's behind that trend. Some of it could be higher fuel prices, but we won't know exactly until we have some conversations with Amtrak customer performance team. April was kind of a surprise. And so April was the first month year over year in which we have the same train capacity. So April 2026 and April 2025 had the same number of seats per train set. And we had 10.8% year over year ridership gain. It tells me a couple things. It suggests that there's lots of latent demand and folks are getting more used to the pricing structure maybe. But I also think that fuel costs are really impacting ridership in Borealis's favor. Those are just theories. We don't know. We don't have enough months for a trend, but something we're keeping an eye on. I also track ridership over trailing 6 months, and because of the capacity reduction, our year over year 6 month performance ridership is down 6.9%, which is better than the previous set of 6 months because April ridership is up. So just another thing to keep an eye on. Our on-time performance has really improved in the past year as Amtrak is working productively with CPKC dispatchers. We've also made some adjustments to the schedule, added a little bit more time to accommodate construction maintenance work on the corridor. But 75% in April is really good. May to date, up to yesterday, on-time performance is 93%, which is pretty amazing considering that all of our improvement projects to increase capacity haven't really started yet. We're really pleased Amtrak and CPKC are collaborating really well to improve on-time performance for our customers. Getting back to January, so this particular winter was probably in terms of intensity about the same as last year, but we had fewer cancellations. We had 9 cancellations this January compared to 13 in January 2025, and that's because we're using Superliner cars. The Horizon cars, as comfortable as they are, they don't perform well in real winter, what I call real winter, with prolonged temperatures below zero. The wastewater tanks in the toilets tend to freeze. And Superliners have a little more protection from cold in the wastewater system. So we think that's one reason for the better performance. Also, Amtrak preemptively canceled trains this past January, unlike previous year, and well in advance, just because they just didn't have a lot of confidence in their ability to operate in St. Paul. Greg mentioned the schedule adjustment that started on April 20th and into June for construction. And that work, so it's on most people don't know what the Watertown sub is. This is basically, the work is going to occur west of Milwaukee, between Milwaukee and Columbus. Once you get west of Columbus, we really shouldn't see additional delays outside of the normal freight train interference delays that we see in Minnesota. Our corridor ID projects. So we have 4 of them. The Twin Cities, Milwaukee, Chicago via La Crosse, second frequency, Milwaukee to Chicago, Hiawatha service expansion, Milwaukee to Green Bay, Hiawatha service extension, and Milwaukee, Madison, Eau Claire, Twin Cities. All 4 of them are still in step 1. We are very, very close to getting FRA approval of our statements of work. And so we anticipate that all 4 will get into step 2 likely in the next 3 months. if FRA moves, as quickly as they can to get us those grant agreements. One note, so it's interesting. We thought the Milwaukee to Green Bay project would be the last to get into step 2, but because it's in the core SDP track, much like the Eau Claire to St. Paul, Eau Claire to Twin Cities corridor ID, the statement of work is a lot simpler. The budget is smaller. We anticipate a budget of less than $2 million for. It has less content than the other 3 corridor IDs. We think there's a good chance it'll get into step 2 first out of the 4. So that's all the information I have for today.
I have a question, Rich.
Sure.
If you're in step 1 and you hope to get to step 2 in the next 3 months, how many steps are there overall?
Okay, there's 5 steps in the process. There's 3 within corridor ID itself. So step 2 will be development of the service development plan. Step 3 is preliminary engineering and environmental documentation. Step 4 is final design. Step 5 is construction. And step 4 and step 5 are funded out of a different program. The Federal State Partnership Program, since unofficially renamed into the National Railroad Partnership Program. So there's 5 whole steps in the service development, route development, and getting into operation before operations. There's 3 that are funded by corridor ID and 2 that are funded by Federal State Partnership.
Director Kolick has a question.
Rich, within the, could you tell the group those first 3 steps from corridor ID, they're all, the funding is obligated through IIJA, or is that some of that subject to reauthorization?
So IIJA expires at the end of this federal fiscal year, which is September 30th. The funding authorization expires. The appropriation is, my understanding, it's still there, but FRA just wouldn't be authorized to fund it beyond September 30th without either a new surface transportation authorization, or we anticipate it'll probably go through a continuing resolution just to keep the same authorization and the same funding levels. Now, the administration did move a lot of the money that was in the Federal State Partnership Program and gave a lot of it to Amtrak. But as far as the corridor ID itself, the funding has not been moved around, to my knowledge, and we do anticipate it's going to continue. To what extent, is it going to be able to fund all of the corridors that were awarded funds? We don't know. I mean, we've heard that just through the grapevine that FRA, US DOT wants to slim the program down, but that has not been confirmed through official channels. In summary, yeah, we think it'll continue. We don't know for how long and how much money is going to be available.